Hi everyone, welcome to today's broadcast for the AdSense 10 Challenge. This week we're focusing specifically on engaging your users and the impact on user experience. So for today's session I thought it'd be helpful to bring in some people with a strong background in this area and to get their thoughts on best practices, strategies, and also to hear what they've done in the past to really engage with users. With that in mind, let's actually go around the room and meet the guests that we have with us today, starting with Anitra, which some of you might recognize from yesterday's presentation. Anitra, can you tell us your name, your relationship with AdSense, and what brought you here today?
Sure thing. So once again, my name is Anitra, and I've been working on the AdSense team for just over 2 years now. And specifically, I work with publishers like yourselves to understand what optimizations you can make to your site to improve the user experience. And specifically, we've been thinking a lot about mobile design and other changes to increase engagement with your users.
All right. Thanks, Anitra. So with that in mind, let's go to Miles, who's joining us from London. Miles, can you give us a brief intro?
Hi, yeah, my name's Miles. I lead the AdSense user experience team here in Google's London office. I've been with Google for 2 years, and we're responsible for all of the user experience of AdSense. So everything you see in the web app is the responsibility of our team.
Perfect. All right, and next let's go to Samir. Samir, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm Samir. I'm the founder at ProProfs.com. We provide web-based tools for building and testing knowledge. So we help educators as well as businesses make online courses as well as make quizzes and tests to go with those courses. We have learners engaged in learning various different topics on our site, doing over 1 million page views a day, and we use Google AdSense to monetize that. In fact, we use a lot of Google products, so everything from Google AdWords to help bring traffic to the site, Google Analytics to measure that. On the site itself, we use a few different Google products from Google Plus ones, Google Authentication to help people sign in, so to improve sign-ups on our site. And actually, we run, even on the back-end side, we use a lot of Google products. So we use Google Apps for our email, document sharing, all of that. So really a long-term Google partner, and excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Samir. I think that's something Googlers definitely love to hear, that our products are being well used. So for today's session, Anitra talked a lot about yesterday the different engagement techniques that you can use. Went over a couple of the few key concepts and what that really entails for each publisher, what it means on your site. So for today's session, let's actually drill down into a couple of those techniques and get a couple examples and thoughts on best practices. With that in mind, that leads me to question number 1, which is, if you're trying to draw more attention to a key element on your page, what's the most effective technique? Yesterday, Anitra mentioned things like size, color, contrast, and placement. So of those 4, Anitra, what do you think is the best technique?
Yeah, sure. So I think as a publisher, what's most important here is actually first taking a step back and thinking, okay, how do I want to prioritize my user's attention? What's the action I'd actually like the user to take? And then depending on the answer to that question, that'll help you decide, okay, what actually is the key element on the page or key elements that I want to draw more eyeballs, more attention towards. And then from there, depending on the layout of your site, as we looked at a few examples yesterday, maybe it's a combination of some of those techniques, but it'll definitely vary depending on the user intent that you're going for and the layout that you're working with. And I would also add, in addition to kind of the design guidelines, things like varying scale and size and color and placement, to also think about highlighting social metrics as well. So if, for example, I've seen a lot of articles publishers that thinking, hey, I want to draw the user's eye to my latest news story. So on my homepage, I'm going to really call that out with a larger box for that news story, and maybe have a thin border around it and highlight the number of users who've read or commented or liked the article. So yeah, that's sort of an example of taking it in context.
Perfect. Okay. Miles, same question, but from the perspective of working on AdSense user experience, what do you think is the most effective technique?
Wow, you've saved the hardest question for the first question. My answer for this, as always with a lot of things in user experience, is it does depend. It depends on what sort of site you have and what sort of users are accessing the site and so on. I think all of those elements should be part of your toolkit. I suppose my advice is to try small steps. Don't try all of them at once. That can be really distracting. You can put off your users. There's a couple of things that we do that really help us understand how people see pages. One of them is to try what we call a squint test. So we either take our glasses off or we sort of squint at the screen and we're not seeing the detail. What we're seeing is just generally what sort of attracts the eye's attention and where people might look. So that's one way that we use to sort of see if one area of the page is getting too much attention or not enough attention. And I guess the other thing is just to think about how users will view your page the first time that they come there. You see your page all the time. So you get very used to it. It's sort of, you see it in quite a different way. So even finding people that have never visited your site and asking them what they see when they first go there is a great way to sort of find out what attracts people's attention.
All right, thanks, Miles. So squint test sounds really awesome, and also getting feedback from your users. With that in mind, Samir, same question, except what has been the most effective technique for drawing attention around a key element on ProProfs.com?
Well, so for us, interestingly, it's been neither size, color, placement, none of that. And when we use analytics and we look at all these numbers, so let's say you're looking at traffic and it's like, say, for example, 100 visitors. What we tend to forget sometimes is 100 visitors means 100 people. To engage them, you need to relate to engage 100 people, and that kind of works the same way it does offline. You need to talk to them. You need to be relevant to them. So for us, it's mostly been, I would say, the value proposition. The text on the page or the value proposition is the number one engagement factor. And one story that I can share, about this was we had this page on online testing software. So we provide a software for making these tests. So we had a page around online testing software, and we were buying traffic to the page. And our bounce rates was like crazy high, like over 90%. And we tried changing the size, color, placement, trying a radically different design, and none of that helped. And finally, what we did was we placed a little chat box on the page to engage with the people who were coming over there. And then we realized that the people who were coming over there, they were mostly looking to QA their software. So they were looking for software to test computer software. They were not looking for a software to make tests and exams. So the words that we were using were basically confusing them. So we changed the value proposition, and we changed the text, and the bounce went down, the engagement went up. So I think that clearly getting the value proposition out is the number one engagement factor.
All right, thanks, Samir. So it sounds like communication is really key in understanding what your users think and what you think they think, and making sure those align. Actually, that kind of lets me segue to my next question, which is focused on the part of our presentation yesterday, focusing on developing that connection with your user base, right? So question 2 was essentially, can you tell our viewers about some of the techniques you use to create that connection and engagement, and give us an example of what the impact has been? Let's start with Miles for this one. Miles, what do you think?
Sure. I mean, we try to do user research every single week. I'm actually sitting inside the user experience lab here in London. I watched a user research session earlier today on some new features we're working on. So that's one of the key ways that we try to understand how our users think about things, how they respond to different features. But I guess there's a range of ways that we listen. So it could be meeting people in the lab or in person at AdSense events, reading blogs, forum postings, using Google Plus like this, and collating feedback from our support teams. So there's a lot of ways which we sort of get that feedback in. In terms of communicating with users, I think there's the AdSense blog, and there's events like this are a way that we can sort of like try and tell people what we're thinking, the direction we're going, and how we can help work with them over time. One thing I'd like to mention is that there is a checkbox in your AdSense settings. There is an option to choose to participate in research. It's one of your email preferences. Can't guarantee that you'll be involved, but the more people that check that box, the more people we can find to talk to. So. Great,
thanks, Miles. And actually, to stress that point, it's getting feedback has also been very helpful for me, especially for these events as well. So definitely 100% agree with you there, Miles. Anitra, similar question. So based on your experience, meeting publishers live, doing road shows like AdSense in your city, what would you say is a technique that works particularly well for connecting with users?
So what I've seen in talking to different publishers is that for publishers, depending on their type of content, who offer an email newsletter or an RSS feed, that can be a great way to give your users the option to engage with your content offline and select the topics that they're interested in. And then additionally, you can do sort of user testing and kind of open surveys and all that stuff. But definitely, if you have content that you can offer comments, reviews, or rating systems on, that's a great way to make it really easy for the user to just directly say, I'm going to give this content 2, 3, 4, 5 stars, and I'm going to write up this review. And it's a really, I think, valuable mechanism for you as a publisher to see, okay, this is the type of content that seems to be appealing and engaging to my users, and okay, this is what's not working out so well. And then for your users, your satisfied users can be kind of the ambassadors to what's interesting for them.
Great, thanks. So Samir, similar question. What engagement techniques have you used for ProProfs to really create that connection?
So what we've seen works the best for engagement has been being relevant and offering quality. And when it comes to relevancy, we have learners engaging in various different topics, learning different topics on the site, doing different courses, different quizzes. So we first thought that let's show them what's popular on the site. So we added a list of popular tests and popular courses to the sidebar, and we didn't get any engagement out of it. And that was very surprising, because these were like tests and quizzes that were already really popular on the internet. This was the most popular content, and we were not seeing engagement with it. And what we realized was a particular student who's engaged in, let's say, studying for the SAT or the GRE, what they want to see is more SAT tests or more GRE tests. They don't want to see what's popular on the internet. So we switched that around, and we started to show just the most relevant content, and that really worked well. Other than that, it was quality. So once we saw this was working well, we kind of doubled down on it, and we started to show as many quizzes as we could. And again, instead of the engagement going up, the user started to ignore it. And then I think it was just if you show too much, you overwhelm the user. So we then came up with this policy of we'll only show the most relevant, top 3 or 4 really high quality links over there. And we started to do that, and again the engagement went up. So it's been relevance coupled with quality for us.
Perfect. Thanks, Samir. I think that kind of basically allows you to think that more stuff isn't always necessarily more interaction, more engagement. So that's a great point to make, and thanks for sharing that. Let's actually move on to our next question. So in yesterday's presentation, we also talked about how customizing your site allows you to allow your users to, adapt your content to their own needs and their own preferences and engage at a deeper level. For example, you can allow them to customize their own t-shirts. You can allow them to create their own themes or dashboards. So for question 3, I'd like to ask, how have you customized your site to facilitate engagement and improve the user experience? Anitra, what do you think for this one?
Yeah, I guess I would first touch on, I think Samir brought up a great point about you want to walk that line between giving your users the option to feel like they can customize some key elements on your site, but also that you're not sort of bombarding them with different options and losing some of the unity that we talked about yesterday. So just anecdotally, in working with publishers, I've seen forum publishers, for example, that are have a lot of return traffic and users were coming back to post again on countless threads, adding fields to their user portal so that the user can add a photo and a name and a short description, and allowing that customization to really have the user feel like they're returning home to the site. And then I would also say, again, related to a point that Samir made, that using related content sections on your site can be a good way to give the user kind of a more custom experience. So when you're showing content that's related, maybe it is just the most popular content or what's contextually related, but it can also be, if it's tied into their social networks, you can show them content that say Lori has +1, for example, and I know that my friend has been interested in this article, and so then I'm more likely to click through. And then I guess the last piece would also be, I think this is something that you don't necessarily think of in terms of customization or making the site dynamic, but if where relevant you have other kind of share and save for later tools, those can help the user kind of put their own spin on what they think is valuable other content when they're sharing it kind of within other networks and offline and emailing it and that kind of thing.
All right. Thanks, Anitra. And Miles, what are your thoughts on customizing your site to facilitate engagement?
Well, it's one of the biggest challenges working with AdSense is that our publishers are so diverse. We have 2 million publishers, and they range from sort of some of the biggest websites in the world down to sort of personal blogs. And so one of the things that I've been working on is making parts of the site work better for different kinds of publishers. So a nice example of that is the allow and block changes, which we made earlier in the year to be more centered around websites. So whether you have 1 site, 5 sites, 10 sites, or even 100 sites, the site works slightly differently to make it easier for you to manage what appears on your sites. The Ad Review Center, which is part of that, is also another example that we refreshed a year ago. So really, I've just been trying to listen to user research and the feedback that we get and make it easier for people to take action and basically deal with things more efficiently. So I think to do that, you really need to understand how to use analytics to work out how people are using different kinds of features. That helps us prioritize those improvements and new features quite a lot. And we're very strongly focused on what people want. I think the number one thing, which I learned the day that I arrived, and it's been true ever since, is that no one will ever move today's revenue from being the number one spot on the homepage, because that's the number one thing that publishers want to see is, how am I doing today? And so it's that sort of thing, listening to how people use the site and making sure that we keep listening is the most important thing there.
All right. Thanks, Miles. And Samir, how have you customized proprofs.com to facilitate engagement and really improve the user experience?
Sure. So I think a lot of the good points were just covered on this. So I'm going to share a tip on what not to do, a lesson that we learned, and I think that is, don't give too much freedom, around customization. And we are a user-generated content site, and I'll share a story with you. When it comes to UGC or user-generated content, it's very unpredictable. So in the beginning, we were creating all these tests around all the popular exams, SAT, GRE, professional education, firefighting, nursing, and we were really waiting on one of these to go viral, go popular. And a couple of months later, we had our first hit, and that hit was a user-generated content submission, and that was called "What kind of a dog are you?" And millions of people apparently on the internet, they want to know what kind of a dog they are. And we just looked at that and we were like, this is so unpredictable. So if we can't control it, let's give full controls to our users. So let them do, customize this the way they want, complete self-expression, and we allow them to change colors, change themes, and it was a mess. We had quizzes which were black background, yellow text on it, really hard to read. Our engagement metrics, they were not where we wanted them to be. and the site just didn't look as good. So we decided to take back some of those controls, be more true to our core around being a professional and educational site. And we took away the controls around color customization, and instead we added like more controls around different use cases for what's true to our core. So are you trying to create a practice test? Or are you trying to create an exam which has a timer on it, answers are only revealed at the end? So more use case level customization as opposed to look and feel customization. And that worked really well. We saw traffic started to come back, people started to really engage. So my tip over there is don't give too much control and be true to your core.
It's great. I think that's a great point to make about sticking to your original value proposition, not letting it deviate too much, and making sure that it's in line with the user experience you want to create for your users. So with that in mind, I actually like to switch gears a little bit and talk about the surprise and delight component of user engagement. So yesterday, Anitra mentioned, if you type in the number of horns on a unicorn on Google search, you're going to get a response that's actually a calculator, and it shows the number 1. So that's just one example of surprising and delighting your users. As you can imagine, this area allows you to really be creative and do a number of different things on the web to really get that engagement. So I'd actually love to go to question number 4, which is, can you give us an example of how you've surprised or delighted your users recently? Or alternatively, can you give us an example of when you've been surprised or delighted by a website and what that impact has been? So let's start with Anitra.
Sure. So I have been pleasantly surprised now and then by some publishers have just really hilarious 404 error pages. And I think it's a great example of it's a moment where clearly something has gone wrong. Either the user's entered the wrong URL, or there's a broken link, or some other issue there. But if, in addition to nice, prominent, and clear navigation to take that user back to the home page, I've seen anything from hilarious videos of someone trying to go over this big hurdle and falling over into a pit of mud, anything like that. It has turned what could have been a frustrating error experience into clear navigation back and something amusing. And I think the other example that I would want to bring up is as a publisher, when you can have kind of a on-point action recognition, and what I mean by that is if a user is submitting a form or signing up for a newsletter or purchasing a product, if you have some quick feedback mechanism that sends them an entertaining or whatever the tone of your site is message that just kind of thanks them for whatever action they took and acknowledges it in an interesting way. I think that's a quick way to communicate the brand and also confirm, okay, yes, as a user you did the right thing. And I think there's some missed opportunities there for some publishers where there is no feedback, and then as a user you're not sure if you took the right action, and yeah, there's some of that continuity lost.
All right, thank you. And Miles, same question. What have you used to surprise and delight users, or alternatively, what have you seen that has surprised and delighted you?
Well, I think something that that we really enjoyed doing a couple of months ago to celebrate the 10th anniversary of AdSense was creating an Easter egg on the AdSense homepage. I guess historically we've kind of seen it as a very serious site because it's important stuff. It's about your revenue, it's about how you're doing with your business, and so no one had really sort of thought to bring in some of that humor or entertainment. And so we said, well, look, let's do something fun. And so we remade a classic video game on the homepage. We knew it was going to be addictive when the entire all our engineering team were playing it all day before release. It was completely addictive. Everyone loved it. And we were thrilled by the feedback that we got, that users really enjoyed it. They enjoyed having some fun while using AdSense, that we weren't always serious. And that's definitely something we'd like to do just a little bit of more in future.
All right, sounds great. And Samir, can you give us an example of surprise and delight for ProProfs.com?
Sure, I'm glad you asked that, because delight is actually one of our brand promises. So it's something we strive really, really hard for. And delight to us means great user experience, and I think great user experience is helping people succeed in what they're trying to do. And in order to do that, you really have to understand your users well. And I'll share an example on this. So we are a quiz site. We help people make these tests and exams and these courses, and we wanted to kind of take the user experience on that to the next level. So we thought, okay, let's start to interview and talk to some of our users. Let's talk to teachers. Let's talk to instructors. Let's talk to corporate trainers and figure out what's the biggest problem that they're facing in creating these tests online. And what we went in expecting was they're going to talk about, how learners are on different devices today. Somebody has so many different kinds of tablets and smartphones out there, and desktops and laptops, and we thought they're going to talk about that, about different screen sizes, or just that students have multiple devices, which can be used for cheating. You always have access to the internet and to find answers, and we thought there'll be some security concerns over there. But what we learned, the hardest part of making a quiz is actually thinking of questions, and that makes a lot of sense. And when we learned that, after talking to them, we were like, okay, how can we delight our users? How can we help them solve this problem? And we started to create question banks around some of the common topics, and we started to even crowdsource some of those question banks. And the moment we did that, our engagement with that specific set of users really went up, because now we had removed the biggest hurdle that was there for them to get success. So success was easier now. So I think that's what Delight is. It's about removing the obstacles to success and getting people to success faster.
All right, thanks, Samir. I think that's a great example. Crowdsourcing, getting people involved, getting them to tell you what they want, and really helping them figure out what their needs are. Okay, so it looks like we only have a couple minutes left, but before we go, I actually love to go around the table and kind of get everyone's final piece of wisdom, or touch on any topic that you wanted to talk about that we may not have answered earlier. So with this, let's actually start with Samir. Do you have any recommendations for our viewers tuning in online about user experience and engagement?
Yes, so I think the biggest thing over there would be to get in front of users. So sometimes we tend to hide behind analytical packages, which are very useful to help get an insight into the users, but it's not a substitute for being in front of the user. So you have to have, you should go out there, where your users are, see them use your software or your website in the field, as well as bring them into your office, interact with them. And I think there's a lot of learning from that face-to-face interaction. Just like the previous example that we shared, if we had not spoken to the teachers about this, we would have not realized how important these question banks were.
All right, thanks, Samir. And Anitra, any final words of wisdom?
Yeah, I would stress that as you do that research and do that insight mining, whether it's in person, informally, or looking deep into your analytics, and hopefully a combination of both, that you really think about the different user types. So we've talked about user intent and different actions, and I think both Miles and Samir have given good examples. Miles in talking about some of the new controls in the Ad Review Center, and Samir in the different types of quizzes that some of his users are going for. And I think when you're thinking about the larger design layout decisions of your site, you really want to be aware of, okay, if I'm optimizing for this one particular type of user and their needs that I've identified, is it actually 3 different types of users with specific goals that are interested in my site, and how does the different kind of visitor flow as users move through my site map to best support those different journeys.
All right. Thanks, Anitra. And Miles, any last bits of wisdom before we go?
I think something that we've learned a lot just from talking to publishers is that don't be afraid to try things out. It can be scary to change things, especially when things are going really well, but it's the only way to really make a difference and actually improve. So start off with small things and see if things work, see if they make a difference, and slowly you can improve your site, improve the experience that your users are going to have. Don't feel that you have to start afresh and have to start everything again. It can just be little tweaks here and there that make a big difference. And I think, to echo what Samir said earlier, don't get too hung up on the user experience and forget about your content. Content really is king. It's why people are visiting your site, and the ways to get people engaged with your content, even creating content on your site, that's super important as well. So don't forget content.
Great, thanks, Miles. And that's actually the end of our session. But before we go, a couple reminders. For those of you tuning in at home, we really do hope this has been helpful. Please feel free to give us your feedback by filling out the check-in survey that is now available on the Google Plus event page. We read these thoroughly. We take your suggestions into consideration. So definitely let us know what you think as we continue to move forward in the challenge and also in the future online events. Next week, we're going to focus specifically on A/B testing and how that relates to user experience, so be sure to tune in there. And lastly, there won't be a Hangout on air tomorrow, but if you have any questions about the topics we covered yesterday and today, feel free to drop in to office hours from 11 to 11:30 Pacific time on Google+, or to ask the members of the community and really get their thoughts on what works for user experience and engagement. And with that in mind, Samir, Miles, Anitra, I just wanted to say one final thank you for joining us today. And for everyone else tuning in online, I'll see you at office hours. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.